Where to go? Florida, Paris, Hawaii, London?
Liefde, pack your bags. We're going to Enkhuizen.
Enkhuizen!
I'm gonna travel the world. I'm gonna go where the Dutch have been, and I'm gonna share it with you, my friends. Let's go Dutch. Let's go Dutch. Let's go Dutch.
We'll explore a historical VLC town that offers everything for the visitor. An open-air museum, a beach, a theme park for kids, a picturesque harbor, a museum filled with ships in bottles. So put on your clogs and let's go Dutch! Enkhuizen lies just 53 miles northeast from Amsterdam in the Noord Holland province. It's just under an hour by train from Amsterdam. When you exit the train station, you're greeted by the harbor. Here, a sign points the direction to the Zuiderzee Open Air Museum. The most famous site of Enkhuizen is the Dromedaris. This massive tower was built in 1540 as part of the original fortifications, and then in 1649, the tower was extended. Enkhuizen received their city charter in 1355. In the 17th century, it was a major harbor town and a member of the Dutch East India Company, along with Amsterdam, Delft, and Hoorn. Competition with Amsterdam and war with England ultimately led to the decline of Enkhuizen. The city is still a major fishing port and is not shy to show off remnants of its prosperous past. Pop quiz! Who remembers the Dutch word for the city coat of arms? How about you, Paulus Potter?
Stadswapen.
Correct! And right here on the Dromedaris is Enkhuizen's Stadswapen.
The lunch menu?
Nay, not lunch. Stadswapen. Enkhuizen's Stadswapen is 3 herrings.
I'm not big on herring, but herring was a major staple of the Northern Europeans. In the Middle Ages, fishermen had to get their catch quickly back to shore, where processing plants cured the herring in salt. This is how fish was preserved and then sold. The Dutch came up with a new method of processing the herring slightly different. This gave it a longer shelf life and better taste. And they also built new boats with their own onboard processing plants. Because they could process at sea, they could venture much further out to where the tastier herring were.
The Dutch had a superior product, and as merchant traders, they made a killing in the herring trade. The fact that herrings are on Enkhuizen's Stadswapen shows you just how big the herring trade was here. If we cross this typical Dutch drawbridge and keep to the right, we'll come across an interesting little museum. This little brick house, adorned with the Stadswapen of Hoorn, Oranje Nassau, West Friesland, Enkhuizen, and Medemblik, was the Spouwhuisje, the 17th century floodgate watchhouse. This is the Fles en Scheepjes Museum. Unfortunately, you have to be able to say the name to get into the museum. So let's practice. We'll take it bit by bit. Fles means bottle, and flessen is the plural, bottles. Scheep means ship. Adding the J-E-S makes it smaller, so this means little ships. Fles en Scheepjes means little ships in bottles. Okay, here we go.
Wat is jouw paswoord?
Fles en Scheepjes Museum.
Fles en Scheepjes Museum. Geweldig, komt u binnen.
Now seriously, have you ever seen so many? Some of these are 750 years old. Just think, if you've ever wondered how did they get them in there, someone had figured it out 750 years ago. The museum even has magnifying glasses to see the detail in the smaller ones. In the heyday of the VOC, it took roughly 2 years to get to the Dutch trading port in Japan. Sailors had quite a bit of time on their hands, and this was one creative way to kill time. Built in 1686, this is the Enkhuizen Stadthouse. The design is neoclassical with the bell tower. In front is a cannon from a shipwreck. The ship was from Duinkerken, which today is in France, but back then was a Dutch city. The cannon is inscribed Charles V, King of Spain and Holy Roman Emperor. Above the cannon on the wall of the Stadthouse is a poem by Joost van den Vondel. This one is a copy. The original is inside. On our Amsterdam show, we showed you Vondel Park, also named for Joost van den Vondel. He's the 17th century playwright and poet. The Dutch Shakespeare. Let's have a peek at the inside. While you may not be able to read Vondel's poem, that won't stop you from marveling at the ornate frame with all its symbols of the story being told. The Stadswapen is all about on chairs and benches of the Wittezaal, the White Hall. Back in the day, it cost an arm and a leg to light a place like this, and as you can see, no expense was spared. Centuries of burgemeesters have left their mark in this Stadthouse. The Wittezaal proudly displays a portrait of hometown boy, Golden Age painter Paulus Potter. As you enter the Ratszaal, you'll feel the Golden Age painted all about. This room was the courtroom centuries ago.
On this spot, right outside the stadhouse, stood a hangman's pole. So you basically went from the courtroom straight to the hanging in just a few steps.
Right behind the stadhouse is the former prison, the Stadgevangenis. Dating back to 1612, it now houses a torture museum. Before we head on, we're going to head down Breedstraat, which means wide street. There's some picturesque old houses worth seeing, if you like that sort of thing. Renaissance-style building is the Waag. And since Enkhuizen was a Dutch East Indies member, you can bet this wayhouse did some brisk business. This Waag dates back to 1559. 3 years later, the Dutch East India Company was formed, the VOC. As a VOC city, the Enkhuizen Waag was witness to the spices and goods pouring in from their Asian trading factories.
Hey, want to see a really pretty Renaissance gable? Built in 1611, this is the West Friesland. Now you might be thinking munt means mint, where coins are minted. And normally you would be right. But in the Middle Ages, this was the only place in all of West Friesland with a large screen TV. The locals would come here to watch their favorite show, the Munsters.
Right across from the Munt is the Westerkerk. This church is on the UNESCO World Heritage List. Come, I want to show you the bell tower. It's quite unique. They started building the Westerkerk in 1470, but the bell tower was built after 1533. It's freestanding, made of wood, and is the last of its kind in Nederland. When built in 1470, the church was Catholic and dedicated to Saint Gammerus van Leer, who was a knight in the court of Pepin. In 1572, Calvinist Protestants took over, and the church became known as the Westerkerk. As long as we're on Westerstraat, I want to take you on a quick detour. Up the road a bit is the Koepoort. This is where having a bite comes in handy. The Koepoort was the western gate into the city and took 5 years to build. finishing in 1654. The tower and the clock were added in the 18th century when the port was restored.
The Koeport means the cow port. Yes, it's true. Cows had their own entrance gate into the city. Have I told you the Dutch are the biggest exporters of cheese? Now, if you happen to be riding by and see something of interest, don't be afraid to stop.
That's a nice gable. What is it?
That's the Oude Vase House. The gable is a 1906 copy of the original from 1616. They used the materials of the original in the new facade. Now, in English, it looks like it says, wee house, a house for the wee little ones.
Come, my wee little one, there's much to see.
She's right. There is much to see. I see before me a splendid gable dating back to 1617. I think we'll just park ourselves here for a moment and admire this serious craftsmanship, if that's all right with you.
That's the Zouderkerk, and it was built between 1423 and 1458. The tower went up in 1450, but between 1518 and 1526, they added the upper section along with the onion dome. There's a 45-bell carillon up there. Here's a little tidbit about Enkhuizen. Along with Utrecht and Amsterdam, they are the only 3 cities in the world with more than one carillon made by the famous Hemony brothers. The Dromedaris is from 1657, and the Zouderkerks is from 1648. Silly me, I almost forgot. The Zuiderzee Museum. Most people come to Enkhuizen for the Zuiderzee Museum. The route is quite scenic, starting with passing under the Dromedaris and over the Brug, and then we continue along the coast, following the Zeemoor. This wall here is called the Zeemoor. That means seawall. It was built in 1608. It was part of the city wall and also defense against the sea. A dual-purpose wall. Double Dutch, I suppose. The Zuiderzee Museum has 2 parts. The outdoor part is called the Buiten Museum, and the indoor part, the Binnen Museum. The buildings that make up the Binnen Museum, which means the inside museum, were warehouses from the Dutch East Indies Company, known as the Paper House. These are the guys that were busy exploring and colonizing the Far East, like present-day Indonesia. The name Paper House comes from the spices being brought back. The Buiten Museum, meaning outdoor museum, is built on the IJsselmeer. which is a lake created when the Dutch closed off the Zuiderzee in 1939. The Zuiderzee, it means the South Sea, and was an inland bay of the North Sea. Former fishing villages around the Zuiderzee donated old characteristic houses to the museum. Specific care was taken to recreate neighborhoods from various islands and towns. This is a recreation of the harbor in Marken, built in 1840. The houses around the harbor come from Monnikendam, Volendam, and Marken. There is also a Marken slipshed where net mending is demonstrated. The inner cluster of neighborhoods come from all over the region. The church neighborhood is recreated from Hindelopen and Harderwijk, two cities on the IJsselmeer. Throughout the Bouten Museum, there are shops to peek in, like the brushmaker, as well as demonstrations in sail and basket making. The smith is busy in the smederij, banging out everything from horseshoes and tools to fishing hooks and anchors. We might even come across a vrouw going about her daily chores. Here she is, keeping all those Delft tiles nice and blue in the Blauer Vishuis, the Blue Fish House. There's a steam laundry from around 1870. A cooper making barrels. There's an old-fashioned apotheek, a pharmacy, complete with a collection of hoppers. Hopper is Dutch for yawner, and while they do look like they're yawning, they sometimes have a pill on their tongue. A doctor typically tells you to open your mouth and say, "Ah!" These Moor's heads were used to advertise the pharmacy to the illiterate and are an indication of the origins of the medicinal herbs being dispensed. Continuing on takes us into old fishing villages like Urk, once an island isolated from the mainland. When the Dutch closed off the Zuiderzee, Urk became an isolated island no more. If we head back that way with the water on our left, we'll reach the dromedaris and the train station. But if we head back this way with the water on our right, we'll reach Sprookjes Wonderland. While heading towards the park, we will pass what appears to be a beach. Could it beach? It beach! This is the Enkhuizen zand. Zand is a Dutch word for beach. To an English speaker, it looks like sand. So you can see the connection to beach, sand. Sprookjes means fairy tales. I bet we have some moeders out there who read Sprookjes to their kinderen. This Dutch treat for the kids is an absolute wonderland. Mom, your kids will no doubt recognize many of the characters, even if it is in Dutch. There's the Pied Piper of Hamelin. Ah, Hans and Grietje, so nice to see ya. Could that be? It be Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Hello, porkers. Better keep an eye on that wolf. I think he smells bacon. The Dutch call her Roodkapje, Little Red Riding Hood. Hello, Tom Thumb. Having fun? There's much to see and do in this park. Your kids will have so much fun, the day will just float by. Dad, you love antique cars, right? How about taking the kids for a spin? An old fishing port town, a prosperous VOC city, picturesque harbors, the Zuiderzee Museum, a fairy tale theme park, a beach. Enkhuizen has it all, doesn't it? I'm Veronica Lewis. Join us again next time on Let's Go Dutch as we explore more of Holland and beyond. Tot ziens!
What do you, Dar?
Learning my lines.